Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I am Diggity Doodah Docky Slipperman. The slippers are in the house and I am here with the wildcard to talk through some Kiwi footballing matters with the Football Ferns in action, preparing for their World Cup, and we also had a little bit of a situation with the New Zealand under-20s men losing in the shootout to Colombia, which I'm all sure you all know what happened there. Best way to support the News Cage is on Patreon, and of course we're open to any and other means of support, likes, shares, comments, rates and reviews, subscriptions, however you want to do it. Just go that extra mile for the boys at the Niche Cage and help us out, do our thing. If you love the content, tell a friend, all that good stuff. And before we crack into some footballing matters, speaking with Aotearoa's number one football journalist, we also have Aotearoa's number one boxing journalist, number one Joseph Parker extraordinaire. He is a man of many talents, and that is the wildcard. So what we're going to do, a little introduction here. Today we're going to talk about specifically what happened with Anthony Joshua and Mr. Ruiz. A little bit of an upset victory there for a couple of minutes before getting into football discussion. And then stay tuned, because the introduction to tomorrow's Black Caps podcast, of course they are taking on Bangladesh at the World Cup overnight. And then we're going to look at the boxing situation from more of a Joseph Parker perspective and the implications there, because as I think we're going to find out tomorrow when the wildcard talks to us about Joseph Parker, things are bloody interesting with Parker in the heavyweight landscape at the moment. So wildcard, how the fuck are you? And thanks for sitting through that 2-minute little jibber jabber there to start with. On the scale of boxing shenanigans, where does this Andy Ruiz victory over Anthony Joshua rank for you?
Mate, I don't even know where to start with that. I mean, when Jeff Horn beat Manny Pacquiao, it was a pretty big deal, right? But when Jeff Horn beat Manny Pacquiao, he was beating old-ass Manny Pacquiao, a little bit over-the-hill Manny Pacquiao, and he also didn't actually beat him. It was a bit of a scandalous result. I can't think of anything else in recent years that gets up on that scale. But the thing with the bloody Ruiz fight, mate, is he wasn't even like... It wasn't like that one cheap shot that got him and just knocked him over. Like, he knocked him down 4 times. He whooped him. He crushed. Like, Ruiz won that fight pretty comfortably in the end. I mean, it wasn't even controversial, and that's against like a fella who had 3 world heavyweight championship belts in his possession. Well, I don't even know how to describe it. I was speechless when I saw it happening, and I meant to watch the fight at first. I was busy doing other things on Sunday, I think it was. And then I just had me scoping through Twitter, and I saw, like, I just expected Joshua to win, right? I just figured it was going to be a relatively comfortable win. I've seen Ruiz fight, saw him fight against Joseph Parker. Ruiz maintains to this day that he actually won that fight. I don't agree. I think Parker, like, a close fight, one of the better ones that Parker's been involved in. But I did think Parker edged that one on points. And then Parker got comfortably edged on points against Anthony Joshua himself. So I didn't think that a guy who beat the guy who beat him was going to be, it was going to have too many troubles there, but, mate, was I wrong? And when I saw, I think it was when he got knocked down in the 4th, I saw something on Twitter just scrolling through and was like, well, I think it's about time that I whip up a stream of this bad boy and then, watch the rest of it from there. And, mate, it was stunning. Like, stunning. I don't even know what more to say about that, eh? Like, I don't know. What do you reckon?
Timely. It was timely. It was a timely victory.
Yeah, like that.
Of the in the heavyweight boxing landscape, just because it's such like bullcracka. It's everyone's trying to not fight the other guys, and everyone's signing these kind of broadcasting deals that isolate them from the other dudes, like Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury. They've all got different deals, and they're all trying to Well, they're all trying to avoid each other, let's be honest, because no one's fought each other other than Fury and Wilder, and they haven't really fought again. So it's like they all talk about not being afraid, but then the shenanigans of boxing has kind of meant that I think what's played out is the fact that everyone's been infatuated with the money they could make, just selling out arenas. So in Anthony Joshua's case, he can just stay in England, fight lesser names to big crowds, and just enjoy that, because there are a bit of complacency. Like, they didn't really think there were any challenges to that top tier of heavyweight boxing. Whereas now, it's not so much a top tier. It's just, this is heavyweight boxing. There's a lot of badass dudes in heavyweight boxing at the moment, and anyone can beat anyone, which is a good thing for boxing.
Yeah, I think what you're saying applies more to Anthony Joshua than other guys as well, because like when you get that standoff and negotiations, it's like who's the one holding up the process here? Like, who's being the difficult party? And I suspect it was Anthony Joshua, just because he had the bargaining power of the extra bouts, and he was making, he's a bigger name worldwide than Deontay Wilder is. So when those two couldn't come to an agreement, and they're each saying that the other one's ducking each other, it's like, well, who do I trust in this situation? And to be honest, I trust Deontay Wilder more than Anthony Joshua. Not because of Anthony Joshua, because I think he's legit. And I don't believe that he went in complacent to this fight against Andy Ruiz. However, I think a lot of the hangers-on around him probably did. Like, I think Eddie Hearn thought that Ruiz, and that's the crazy thing, Ruiz took he wasn't even meant to be in this fight. It was supposed to be Jarrell Miller, and the dude failed a PED thing, and Ruiz came in with 4 weeks' notice to take the fight, and then he won against a almost unanimous heavyweight champion. Like, that's just incredible. I don't think there's been an upset that big since like Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson, and that I think is probably before I was born. So yeah, so you get this situation where guys are maybe ducking and dodging a little bit, but I think you're probably looking at Anthony Joshua if you want to point fingers there. I reckon he got found out a little bit in his technique, guy who's got this as far as he has just through his sheer, knockout ability. And when he came up against a guy he couldn't knock out in Joseph Parker, you saw they really reined that one in, and he didn't open himself up at all. He didn't take risks. He just shut it down and made sure he won that thing on points with a comfortable and boring result against Parker. That didn't give Parker basically any chance, especially, Parker's team having a big moan about the way the referee didn't let them get in close in that fight. It may be fair enough, but whatever. Joshua won that one fairly comfortably because he chose to win it comfortably rather than risking winning it flamboyantly. But he didn't do that against Ruiz. He didn't shut it down against Ruiz. And if he did his homework, he would have seen that Ruiz hits extremely hard, probably harder than Joseph Parker, and he takes a hit just as well as Joseph Parker. Like, when those two fought, neither of them could hurt the other dude. It was why it was an interesting but kind of subtle fight. And yeah, I reckon that caught up with old AJ. I reckon they, not so much him himself, but his team around him. And I've seen Lennox Lewis on Twitter talking a few times about how it's just time for him to get a new trainer and get some new ideas into that camp, freshen up his style and all that. I don't think that would be a terrible idea, to be honest, Doc.
Did you see any development, good or bad, in Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz since their last Joseph Parker fights? It's more interesting to talk about Andy Ruiz in this conversation because he had his fight against Joseph Parker. So did you see improvements or anything different from what Ruiz was doing from the Parker fight to the Joshua fight?
I don't know. That's hard to tell because you get the old cliche in boxing is styles make fights, and Joshua and Parker were very similar, I think. And guys that, it's hard to say because obviously Ruiz we know now has knockout power, but he wasn't able to bring the knockout power against Joseph Parker, who is extremely hard to hurt. I think we've seen him hurt once in his whole career. That was against Dillian White. So, I don't know. It's hard to say because Ruiz disappeared for a while after that fight. He wanted top-notch fights in the wake of having fought for a heavyweight title bout, and he didn't really get them. He sort of went off the scene for a year or two, and then came back fighting a few guys he was expected to win, and then all of a sudden he leaps into contention again with this fight almost out of nowhere. I think the big difference was just how Joshua approached it. Like I was saying before, he wasn't as careful as he should have been, and I think he got exposed for a few of the flaws in his his defensive technique, because we know the dude hits hard, but it was always a question of like, well, what happens when you take that out, and what happens when he gets hit in return? And he got rocked by Klitschko back in the day, got up off the deck and came back out and won that thing, but he didn't get rocked like he did in this one early on, which meant he had to fight through fatigue the whole rest of the way. I think it was round 3 or 4 he got knocked down a couple times, and then again in the 7th when it got stopped. That's tough, and he did not look fit, if I'm honest. I don't know if that was because he was hurting. Don't know if that was because, the threat with him is that he carries so much muscle. You wonder if that affects his, fatigue, and maybe it did. Maybe that was a problem. I thought he actually looked a little less ripped in this one, a little more sort of heavyweight boxer shape, although not the heavyweight boxer shape of Andy Ruiz, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard to compare based on where they were, but either way, results against both of them, but especially his result against Ruiz, looks a whole lot better in hindsight now, considering this. But even the Joshua result looks a little bit better when you look at what Joshua did and what Joshua's mentality and his team's mentality was for that in order to fight so conservative against Parker. It shows this is what they were trying to cover up, the thing that they just got exposed for against Ruiz.
Do you have anything else to say about that specific fight? Any other insights?
Ooh, I don't know. Not massively. I want to watch it again and then write about it, so we'll see how that goes.
Roger Dodger, I'm sure you have been analysing Mr. Wood? How would you pronounce?
Woud. It depends how you want to. The anglicised New Zealand version seems to be Wood, but the esteemed John Helm, commentator extraordinaire at all these FIFA tournaments, has been calling him Michael Woud, which is the proper Dutch pronunciation. And in my research for Flying Kiwis every week, often because he plays in Holland, I have to employ the old Google Translate to sort things out. And Woud is a Dutch word that means forest or, woods. It's pretty similar, wood. So Woud means forest. So when I'm Google translating articles about Willem Twee, is it Twee? I can't remember how you say two in Dutch. But yeah, when I'm translating articles about them, it always comes up Michael Forrest is done, So I guess we go with Woud now after the precedent's been set. I don't know.
Right, Mr. Woud, have you...
Just quietly, I like Woud because it differentiates him from Chris Wood.
Yeah, definitely. And it's completely different spelling, so...
One letter, yeah. One letter makes all the difference.
Mr. Woud, how... It's an interesting one because when you're talking about penalties, that kind of situation is incredibly influential to the result. And we kind of have to start our discussion about the under-20 men's Aotearoa football team there. I don't want to dwell on it because there's not much point. The ref, we all know sports refs are a bit weird and they make interesting decisions and you can't change it. So there's no point really dwelling on it. But here's the floor for you to say whatever you want to say about it, because personally I couldn't really care less.
You can care a little bit less. There's a saying about penalties that penalties are a lottery, and I just don't believe that. I think penalties are a great way to decide a game which otherwise has been a stalemate up until that point. I think when you look at the very essence of football, it's kick the ball into the goal. And, you got a team of guys helping you to get to that point, but only one person gets to score the goal at the end. And you've got a goalkeeper with gloves trying to stop you. You've got a team of defenders trying to stop you. Well, okay, we've cancelled each other out as two teams of 11, so let's just strip away, the 9-10 other guys, and we'll just have striker versus goalkeeper. This is how we're going to figure this thing out. I think it's a great kind of summation of the ultimate goal of football, which is to score more goals than the other team. So I think it's a lovely way to finish games. I love penalty shootouts; they're fantastic. I love the psychology of penalty shootouts. I think I think that's fantastic too. I'm always so intrigued by that. A lot harder when you're actively supporting one of the teams, when you can't take that sort of backward step and just kind of admire it from a bit of a distance. That becomes tricky, but yeah, that's a good solid way to decide a game, not a lottery, based on skill, based on your ability to own the important moment, like these great things that we rate in sports and and athletes at the top levels. So no dramas there. Big dramas, however, when you're gonna be picking up like the such a minor thing too. I've gone over this and over this. I wrote a whole thing about it, trying to figure out exactly what he did wrong. And he does a little jump, sort of shuffle to the side as he goes to dive, and he does this for all his penalties, so it's a bit weird. But he's allowed to do that as long as he stays on the line. So it's a matter of whether, as the ball is kicked, he's actually edged in front of it. And honestly, none of the video that we saw in the actual broadcast was conclusive in any way. I think it's more likely that he had a heel on the thing, so I just think it was a dodgy call. But I also understand that there's a good chance the video ref had that goal line camera, which would have solved it once and for all. So I'm not going to say it was the wrong call, because for all I know, he had a better angle than I did and made the decision based on actual empirical evidence. But it's such a minor thing. I don't think that's clear and obvious, and I just don't like the precedent of being able to do that and taken away from the moment like that. But I'm not a person who's anti-VAR in football, so that's not something I'm upset about. I think there was actually a great example of how to do that earlier on in the tournament. There was, I think it was Saudi Arabia were playing Mali, and Saudi Arabia had a penalty. The Malian keeper jumped off his line early, saved it. They looked at it. Clearly he was over the line, it wasn't even in doubt, so, retake the penalty. We'll do this again. You cheated, you jumped the line early, done. Whereas Michael Veld, I don't think he intended to jump off his line early. I don't even know that he did, so whatever. I don't want to spend all day talking about a missed call like that, but I think some of the comments from people who know a lot more about these things, like Chris Milicic was saying on Twitter, that the damage this does psychologically, and what is such a psychological aspect of the game, a penalty shootout, it's so important to be the team, to be the person who holds your head in that most pressurized situation. And here we had a goalkeeper completely compromised the rest of the way because he couldn't move in the way he wanted to. He was worried that if he jumped early or if he got too eager, he's got a second yellow card and he's sent off, and then it's game over from that point. So it just ruined the shootout, really. And New Zealand were on the brink of would have gone 2-0 up if Max Matter had stepped up and scored, which he did anyway after the penalty was retaken. Big difference there. We only need 2 positive results from the last 4 penalties and you're through. Just swung momentum entirely. So I'm not comfortable with how that played out, but the main thing I take from that is what a luxury it is to have had a football team, and a lot's been said about how well this team competed in a FIFA tournament, not just getting results, but playing positive, attacking football, playing really good, enjoyable football, playing with great belief and confidence and all these things. A lot's been said about that, and it's true, and it was the same in that game, and what an absolute luxury to have a New Zealand team at a FIFA tournament where we can walk away from it and say, we were robbed there. We were robbed by a dodgy refereeing decision. And you have to be at a certain level in order to be robbed like that. So I just think it's a great testament to the team that they got to that point and got ripped off in such a way.
Which is lovely. It's obviously a crucial decision and it shouldn't be overlooked. But in talking with you, I'm more interested in what you made of the team's performance, because when I was watching it, I was pretty damn impressed with the chances they were creating, how they were dealing with Colombia, how they were operating in such an important game against a good team. So I'm more interested in how that game and how you reflect on the World Cup in general, which I think can be overlooked or overshadowed by that decision. Now, no one's talking about which is the biggest breakout player from that team. No one's talking about where these dudes come from, who they are. No one's telling those stories because we're all concerned with this penalty shootout, which is a bit of a shame, but that's why the niche case is here and we don't fuck around. So we're here to talk about that. So wildcard, who would you classify as like a couple of big breakout players who, strictly from their performances at this World Cup, could be looking to break into the top tier kind of flying Kiwis bracket that you have?
Yeah, there's one who's already in that top tier based on the last couple of months, which is Michael Veld. And when you talk about people being overshadowed by that decision at the end there, I don't think anyone got overshadowed more than he did. Here is a goalkeeper who is extraordinarily talented, and we've known this. He's been to several FIFA tournaments already. He's been to, I think, at least one under-17s, and he was at the last under-20s as well. And he did so well against France at the last under-20s. I think we lost 2-0 on that day, but he made a bunch of top saves. And apparently, according to a couple of articles I've seen this week, there are French teams, Monaco was one that was mentioned, who have been monitoring his progress ever since then. Is so impressed that they were. And this dude is, he spent a while with Sunderland. He was in the Sunderland system with Sam Brotherton coming up, and Brotherton started getting popped out on loan. Veld was hanging in there and actually starting to get quite a few games for the under-23s while he was still, 19 years old. And then started last season, he decided he wanted to be playing first-team football full-time. Didn't want to go out on loan. I think he might have had 1 year left on the Sunderland deal, or maybe it was expiring and he didn't want to sign another one. So he left to Holland, which is where his... I think his father was from Holland as well, so it's obvious. His name is Dutch, so he's got the Dutch heritage. Makes sense. Goes to Willem there, and he hangs around as sort of like the third string keeper for the first half of the season. Signs at the same time as James McGarry as well, who's the guy who left the Phoenix, who was, I think, in the previous under-20 system, so 1 or 2 years older than Veld. And McGarry gets a couple games at the start of the year and then just mostly sort of plays sparingly off the bench after that. Veld starts off playing off the bench basically the whole way through. Then their second string keeper leaves. Then their first string keeper just in the last couple months of the season has an injury or two, and Veld comes in, makes his debut, plays a couple games. So he was really well poised to be an important player at this tournament. But the thing is, the under-20s defense was so damn good. He actually, the first two games, he actually wasn't very bothered. He barely had a difficult save to make. And then in the third game, he was rested. In the fourth game, he comes back in for Colombia. And he had an excellent game. He had a couple really good saves in that one. Then come the penalty shootout. He makes two brilliant saves to start with, makes a third save. The save gets retaken. They score. They score the next four after that. New Zealand end up losing on the penalty shootout. And this guy is already in that top flying Kiwis tier. He's not a week in, week out top flying Kiwis tier. He does have to wait for the top fella to be injured, but he's there and thereabouts, and this was his opportunity to really make some headlines. And he did make headlines, but he made them for the wrong reasons, which was kind of sad. So a little bit bummed that he missed out on his moment in the spotlight there. A couple other breakout players from this tournament. I don't think we saw the best of Callum McCowd. He didn't score a goal, which was a little bit of a shame because we know he's in the shot window. But worst case scenario, he's always got the Ole legs in Denmark or Sweden to sort him out with. I think Joe Bell was the best player for New Zealand. Midfielder, came up through the Phoenix system. Winston Rufer was saying in some media thing the other day that apparently he's had people calling him from Germany asking about this Joe Bell fella. He's at Virginia, the University of Virginia, where he's been playing extremely well the last couple of years. I think he has 2 more years there, maybe 1 year. I don't know if he'd be interested in ending his studies early to play professionally in Europe or not. I assume that's an opportunity you don't turn down. You can always go back and study or part-time or whatever. But interesting note there is that that's the same school in America that Jack Salt won the national championship basketball with. So, cute Kiwi sporting connection there. And then also you got the obvious candidates like Libby Kikache, who was never not impressed, never not stood up to the occasion as a professional footballer yet that I've seen. I thought Sarpreet Singh was pretty good in these. Eli Just had a great tournament. Nando Pinecker at the back is a fantastic centre-back, another one of the Ole boys. So yeah, a lot of really impressive players there who are going to have good long careers, and it's pretty interesting to see how everyone ends up now from this point on. quite looking forward to the article in like 5 years, which is the 2019 under-20 squad. Where are they now?
You'd be confident in saying that a lot of these players have the ability to break into professional football around the world, whether it be in America with the Major League or in Europe, and kind of break that mold of a lot of the best players having to go through the Phoenix. Like, a lot of them are already playing professional football, which tells you the quality, but then these breakout stars, like I think that is the Pianka Nando, would you say Nando? Is he...
We call him Nando, yeah.
He's just playing with Eastern Suburbs, right?
Yeah, he has been. I don't know if he's one like... Eli Just and Dalton Wilkins signed with a club in Denmark recently, which has a connection to Ole Academy. Ole set up that connection with a Swedish team in one of the lower tiers, and they signed two fellas who were too old for this under-20 squad, in Owen Parker-Price and Harry Edge. And I think Declan Edge has also gone over to be like a technical advisor for that club. And the idea is that they're going to bring that club up through the ranks over the next couple years, get a couple promotions, and then use them almost as a feeder club for Ole overseas, just to get a couple of their best players through. Dan Keat as well, who's got Ole connections and a former All-White, played for LA Galaxy for a while. He's involved in that too, on the ground level. So there's that connection. There's also a similar one from an American businessman who has set up a thing at that Danish club that Justin, or Just, if we're going with proper pronunciations here, Just and Wilkins have signed for in Denmark, so who actually just got relegated to the third tier, which was a bit of a bummer. Still in contention on the last day with about 10 minutes to go, and they conceded a goal, and a team in a different game scored a goal, and that took it out of their hands. So yeah, but you got to work your way up. So I am a little bit concerned about like the risk of these top-notch guys going over to what are lower tier Scandinavian clubs, which is we've seen with a lot of guys go over there, don't have a fun time, come back. These guys are more in control of their circumstances because of the various like ownership connection type things there, but it's still like it's a long way off Champions League, but hey, if everything works out and you build your way up, you at least get a foothold in the professional ranks in Europe, and you see where you go from there, build up a highlight reel, get some kind of European passport if that's possible. A few of these guys it is possible for, so yeah, I mean, we'll see how that goes. They're all young, so they've all got time up their sleeve. But McCowart didn't sign immediately with that Danish team, which he could have. He was on trial at the same time. He wanted to see how he went at the Under-20 World Cup before making any decisions. I think it's without question he's going to go somewhere. That, like, at the very least, he's got that club to fall back on if he doesn't have something else. So, yeah, I mean, he spent some time on loan, not on loan, but like on a trial basis, just training, not really with the intent to sign, but just training with Sparta Rotterdam in Holland before the last Premiership season. Then came back, Golden Boot for Eastern Suburbs, Player of the Season, should have been the MVP. So he's got a decision to make, and then, coming up over what he does. Peinecke's interesting because he didn't, he's the other guy who's obviously of equality with these other fellas to be jumping into the ranks like that, but he hasn't, from what I've heard, inked anything yet or made an agreement or whatever. So, but I mean, it's the same. In worst case scenario, he's got those clubs he can probably get a go with, other if he can't do something else. So I wonder maybe he was waiting to see about the under-20s as well and see how he went. If so, he was bloody excellent all tournaments, so he should have a few phone calls.
Mate, I don't even know where to go from that. You've broken down all sorts of wrinkles about the
Football Ferns now.
Footballing academy development, which, if you'd give me the last word, wildcard, on the under-20s,
fire away.
If I may, what you've just explained and what we've witnessed is a sign of just where football in New Zealand's at, and we can talk about the injustices of the referee, or we can talk about the heartbreaking way they were knocked out of the Under-20 World Cup, but the whole thing, and then capped off with what you just outlined, which was pretty phenomenal insight, the whole thing is a reflection of the work a lot of different people are doing in football in New Zealand, and it's a rare place when we have a talented team, as we had at the Under 20 World Cup. Like, we're so used to New Zealand football just being a certain way, and many people would agree that hasn't always been the best and most efficient way. So now we're just in this whole different space of New Zealand football with that under 20s team and what they delivered and how the talent is being rolled out in New Zealand throughout the world and into the All Whites as well, and then flowing into Football Ferns, who last we talked they had a win over England, I believe, and then they've just had a loss to Wales. So you don't necessarily need to go into specifics, just because we're short on time here, about the game against Wales, because these are just warm-up games for the World Cup, correct?
Yeah, warm-ups. Last 2 warm-ups before flying over. I think tomorrow they fly to France to set up camp for the World Cup, which starts on the weekend overall, but for them it's Wednesday morning 1 a.m. against Netherlands is their first game.
Yeah, roger that. So how do you, considering the up and down nature of those results, similar to the Black Caps kind of warm-up games as well, how do you assess the Football Ferns and where they sit right now ahead of this World Cup after those results?
Yeah, so I think both of those results are a little bit of a smokescreen. Like, where do they stand? Are they the team that lost to a Welsh team that didn't even qualify, or are they the team that beat the third-ranked team and one of the, in England, and one of the candidates to win the whole World Cup? Well, I mean, obviously they're somewhere in between. And it was kind of an interesting experience watching both those games, because the first game, the second game, they were almost identical, except the Football Ferns were on the opposite side. The first game against England, they did a lot of defending. They struggled early on with their formation, switched it up to get an extra midfielder midway through. I think that made a big difference. And from there, they just managed to grow in confidence the longer they could keep it 0-0. And when they played America a couple weeks ago, and they lost 5-0, and there were a lot of reasons why. I think I might have even talked about this on a podcast. If not, I've written about it a few times. A couple of reasons why that wasn't a great warm-up game at that time. America were just way more in their stride. They've been working together for longer. Ferns weren't at full strength. They had a couple players missing still, and were just beginning their full-time camp heading into the World Cup. So big difference there. But in that game, they actually looked quite good for the first half hour. Then they conceded one, then they conceded straight again, sort of late in the first half, and just not quite owning those moments. And fitness looked a little bit of an issue at times, which isn't a surprise for players who are at different stages of their preparation for this World Cup and all that. Since then, we've seen a big improvement as they've finally got their squad together. The win against England was the first time they had full strength, everybody to choose from. And they defended really well. The longer they kept it at 0-0, the more confident they looked. Then they came out, scored early in the second half, and then just held it on from there. But they just sort of set players behind the ball, defended well, just won a whole bunch of clearances, winning all those headers, getting rid of the ball there. Not always looking fluid going forward, but at least looking sturdy at the back. And against a team like England, who were mixing it up themselves with some of their selections, just trying to get everyone game time before the World Cup, England just didn't look like they had a lot of creativity, and they didn't really have an answer to, when those crosses weren't working, they didn't really have an answer of how to break down the New Zealand defence. And they sort of just got tame and ended up, I thought towards the end, I was surprised that England didn't actually get a little bit more desperate trying to go for an equaliser. I think they sort of accepted the result near the end there. But against Wales, it was the exact opposite. Wales were the team defending sharply and just putting people behind the ball and frustrating the Ferns, who we know at times have a lack of creativity and don't always, they're probably missing a superstar striker in this team. And a lot of these players would be better if they could play off a focal point like that, but we don't have someone of that caliber, like Sam Kerr for Australia, for example. We don't have someone at that level, so you make do. And it looked like the Ferns, just the same as England, didn't have the creativity, didn't chucked a lot of balls into the box, putting it in the mixer, but couldn't really figure out a way to score from there. Didn't take their chances, couple of long shots that weren't on target, these kind of things. And I thought that was a really interesting way to play, to be just to be on the other side of that. So I think there are a lot of lessons despite the result, and again, conceding a late goal was pretty silly. It's exactly the kind of thing you cannot be doing at a World Cup. Like, it's one thing not to win a game you're expected to win, but you definitely can't be losing them. But, still a warm-up. Like, it's fine. It doesn't count for anything at this point, and there are a lot of lessons to learn from that. And, I think, in a way, the combination of these two games, and I was critical about the American game, not that they took that because I understood it, it's just that I didn't think we could learn anything from that game, just the position of the two teams at the time. Whereas these two games here against England and Wales, I think we learnt plenty, and I think there are a lot of lessons that they can take from that, which put them in a pretty good place going into the World Cup, as long as they learn those lessons. Like, for example, Sarah Gregorius cannot be missing a penalty late in the dominant first half. Like, that's just a massive boost to Wales. That, I mean, if she'd scored that and we're going in 1-0 at halftime, we might have even been 2-0 at halftime at that point. We're on top of the game and beginning to maybe look like breaking them down. When you don't take that chance, you suffer for it. And the Ferns aren't going to create a massive amount of chances against Netherlands or Canada, so if they're going to score, they need to be really clinical when they get those chances. So missing penalties is the exact opposite of that. But yeah, I think if they take the lessons from those two games, I think they're still in a pretty good place to achieve their goals at the World Cup, which are same as it's always been: win a game, get out of the group. Like, if they can do those two things, tick those two boxes, then it's a successful World Cup. And anything beyond that is a bonus. I think anything beyond that is extremely unlikely, but those two goals specifically, definitely within their grasp. And yeah, I'm just excited for the World Cup to start now, to be honest.
And when does that start? Give us some details.
Well, I already broke that down a little bit before. Ferns' first game is against Netherlands on Wednesday at 1 a.m. The tournament itself begins on the weekend. France plays someone, I can't remember, but France are the hosts. I'm going to do a little bit more research, hopefully find time to actually do a full-on preview of all the other teams and whatever, so don't ask me too many questions at this point because I'm underprepared. But yeah, it's going to be a good World Cup. It's going to be like with the growth on the women's side of the game just in recent years, with leagues like America really sturdying things up after some shaky years in the past with their domestic club stuff, with the English Super League in England going from strength to strength with the absolute quality of a couple of those teams in Germany and France and Spain just like rising to the top, Juventus as well, I would say. I think there's it's not even I think. I know this World Cup is going to be on a level that we haven't seen before from the Women's World Cup. So it's going to be a bit of a milestone tournament, even beyond it being like a World Cup.
Do you have an early favourite?
Well, USA are always the favourites. But I tell you what, if I'm going to chuck a dark horse to win the whole thing, I don't think Australia are too far off. I think that Aussie team is really good these days. They beat the Ferns a couple months ago. Ground them down 2-0, fairly, expected result. But that Australian team is packed full of quality. They got a lot of players who play in America in particular, but also the W League in Australia is really strong for quite a convenient reason, because the way it works is it sort of happens in the off season of the American League. So you get a lot of the best players from America who are just like, yeah, I want to keep playing. I'm not injured here. I'm feeling good. Let's keep this whole thing going. And they'll sign like short-term deals to play the Australian season and the off-season and sort of bounce back. Sort of like you see in like baseball and basketball kind of thing, where you get people playing 2 different seasons, just mixing it up.
Lovely, jubbly. We'll wrap it up there, wildcard, and just repeat. So the Football Ferns, they start next Wednesday, a week from this recording time. So we might be back to doing. We might be back to doing more in-depth preview. Until then, on the agenda, we've got Black Caps tomorrow. There'll be a rugby league episode tomorrow as well. Also touching on State of Origin, which is tonight, Wednesday night.
Oh, what's your pick?
What's my pick? I reckon New South Wales.
Oh, yeah? I actually forgot it was on completely. When the Cricket World Cup started, got all this football going on, and the NRL, both the Warriors and the Dragons had a bye last week, and I just tuned out and forgot about it.
Yeah, Queensland have I talked about this yesterday on the Rugby League episode, so I'll just repeat it. Queensland have the Munster and Ponga factor, but I think New South Wales just have a better team and a better bench for what Origin's going to be. I think it's going to be really rugged, but then you've got the mobility, Cameron Murray, Angus Crichton, those type of dudes coming off the bench for New South Wales with the likes of Jack Wyden as well. So that's why I'm going with New South Wales. And just to wrap it up on a weird note, Brad Fittler, I was thinking about this wildcard, and Brad Fittler just...
It's always a weird note when Brad Fittler's involved.
Well, actually, it's not actually about Brad Fittler, because Brad Fittler's just... He implemented some amazing, fascinating kind of preparation and team culture building ideas for New South Wales last year. And Kiwi Walters has come out with... He's trying to... I wouldn't say copy, but he's come out and trying to, implement his own stuff. But his stuff doesn't come across as like a genuine thing. So in the battle of doing things differently, Brad Fittler still leads Kiwi Walters by some margin, for those who care.
Makes sense. I mean, you either want to be a leader or an innovator. You don't want to be the follower who comes in too late. General life advice?
Or be the guy following the trailblazer.
Well, the thing is, the guy following the trailblazer normally makes all the money, right? Like, the person who comes up with the idea, they're the ones who are the influencers, but they're not necessarily the ones who cash in. But then I doubt Brad Fittler invented team building. He's just had good ideas at the right time.
Yeah, and I wouldn't exactly call him a trailblazer, because he's just doing things from a better perspective that the old school beer drinking, pokey playing culture of Australia can't quite comprehend. They're just amazed that we're in 2019 and you should be walking around barefoot. Like, Australia is just so caught in the past that anything like this seems ridiculous, where it's just pretty much common sense. So we'll wrap it up there, Wildcard. We'll be back tomorrow talking Black Caps and Rugby League as well. 2 different Nichecast episodes, 3 in 24 hours. You know how we roll, just serving up the Kiwi sporting glory to you all. Peace and love.